Hi there, this is Kevin Tharp, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Camera Pass tool. The Camera Pass tool is available in OpenBrush under the Advanced mode, and then it is under the More tab. And you click Camera Pass, and it'll bring up this Path tool. So the Camera Path tool, when you first open it, before you have any paths, it only has one option, which is to add a new path. So that's where we're going to start. So we start with a new path. When we click on that, we get the tool for adding an anchor point. And so what we're going to do, I've brought a model in here, and we're going to just use that as a tool for going. So when you're doing a camera path, it starts with 2 points. You got to have 2 points in order to use a camera path. And so you'll notice as soon as, let me move this a little out of the way, as soon as you've got 2 points on a path, this path panel becomes, well, there's more in it. And so what you've got in there is the tool, the choice to select paths, because you can have multiple paths in there. You've got the ability to show paths, and what the show paths does is Tharp makes the paths that you have already created accessible and visible to you. Delete is to delete a path. That deletes the path and everything on it. There's also record path, which once you have your path down, it will allow you to record that path so that you can use that video. The next thing that we have is a viewfinder. Now, in this case, let's talk about the viewfinders, because there's actually 2 of them here, and they're tied to each other. So this viewfinder is located on the path, and it will show on this viewfinder what this sees. So this is the main viewfinder. This shows is sort of the monitor of the viewfinder. So whatever you're looking at will show up in that path. Now at the moment, I've got it facing around backwards from what I wanted. So as I move forward, you can see that as it follows that path, it comes in and goes in towards the object that we're studying. So now let's focus on just the anchor points tools. So I am going to zoom in a little bit here. And okay, so the element that you created was an anchor point. The anchor point is when you have 2 of them, unless you have manipulated it, what you've got is the straight path between those 2 points. That is the camera path. But the anchor points allow you, they've got these controls on them, and what they do is they allow you to change that line. Essentially, you're changing mathematically by adding an arc to it. So if I wanted to come up and out of this point and then arch over to the other one, what I've got the ability to do is on both of these points, so both of the points are going to affect how that line lays out, and that is subsequently going to change the way that your camera tracks on that path. So that is the anchor point, and that is pretty much the only thing that it does. It establishes the path, and then it allows you to manipulate that path so that the camera will follow it. When you have more points in here, so I'm going to add another anchor point, and when you add an anchor point, you can only add, you can either create a new path, which would be done up in this tool, or you can hook onto one of the points at an end, or you can add a point in the middle of a line. So those are our options, and with those options, you can get very creative. about how your path is going to go. So like with this particular path, because of the ways that it's interacting between this point and this point, whoops, I didn't want that. Let me turn off the add anchor point. That line, because it was shorter, was giving me a very sharp point there. So by extending those out, you can lessen the severity of those curves. And so that is part of the art of what you're going to want to do. And like, for instance, here I can make it look like a sine wave. Now, going back to my monitors, when I have multiple points, what you can see is that I can come to with either viewfinder. Now, this viewfinder, until I set a direction point, is going to change. So as I spin my world around, you notice that the viewfinder, the direction in relationship to where I'm at stays constant. Well, that's not what you normally want it to do. We'll go into in a minute how you control that, but I'm going to adjust this, and it's going to stay in the same direction for this. And so there is our viewfinder. Here is our monitor of our viewfinder, also a viewfinder. And then you can click the play button to have the camera follow that path as you set it up. Now, since all I've done at this point is set up the path, that's all that it has to work with. It has a fixed speed, a fixed zoom, and a fixed direction. So we've already looked at the add anchor point. We've got the ability to delete points. So that will delete the anchor point or any other points that have been added to it. And you simply click on that to make it happen. And there, I've just undeleted it. The next tool that we're going to be working with is this add direction point. So when you click the add direction point on your brush hand, it gives you a camera that you can place in there. So what I'm going to do on this path is I'm going to come and I'm going to place this. I'm actually going to place it not on the anchor point, but on the arc, the line, being a little bit closer here. Okay, so I'm going to place that on there, and you can see that it highlights the section of the path that it's going to be applied to. Those are isolated by the anchor points, so if you want to block it, you use an anchor point. But if you come in, you'll notice that if I'm very close to an anchor point, it applies to the path on both sides of that anchor point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my anchor point close to the beginning. I'll end up moving this camera path down right to the anchor point when later on, but for ease of use, I start with it off of the anchor point because it makes it easier to grab. And so I'm just going to use my brush to aim that. And the way that I aim it is I have selected it, and I select it simply by placing my controller on it till it is highlighted in that color. And then I can grip it. So when that's there, if I grip it, that allows me to move it, manipulate it, change it. And if I pull the trigger, then I can see in the viewfinder what I'm looking at that point. So if we follow the path again, now that we have set the direction, it's going to do basically the same thing because I set the camera to be about the same place. Now what I want to do is I want to change the camera path. Let's go to the end of this. Let's say that I got here and this last section, I wanted to go the other direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a camera direction to this part of the line, and I click on it and you can see it. I let it go, and now I'm going to move that to the very end. And the reason I'm moving it to the very end is because if you don't, you'll end up with some weird things that happen right when it comes to the end of that path, where it'll get jerky or there will be a sudden movement. So I always end up starting and finishing with a camera directly on it. Let's take a look at that path and see what we end up with here now. So now you notice that that started turning around before it came over this. So if I want to control the direction of that camera, right now this adjustment from this camera to that camera is following the entire path. But what I can do is I can come in and let me move this out of the way and stop it. I find that it's better to stop it than have it interrupting my path. I want it to stay here, stay this same direction as it zooms in. So I'll put that direction in there, I squeeze it, and you can see what we've got. And so now I come back to my viewfinder, and I'll put it so you can see both of them, and then we'll play it again. So I go back to the beginning, and only after it hits the portion of the arc after this second camera does it start spinning to what the direction is for the third camera. Now, let's say that I wanted to look down on the top from here. I don't have to have my cameras on points. I can change that so that I'm looking from a different direction wherever it's at. So now let's see what that does. And what you're gonna find is getting the hang of the camera pass is a process of make a change, look at how it changed other things as well. Because every time you add this, it's going to have an effect on the arc of the camera path before and after it. Just like the original two cameras, it started with the camera pointing this direction there, and it took all the way to here to spin it. So all those points interact with each other, and it's a transition. It's not a jump from, okay, I'm going to stay like this, and then suddenly I'm going to jump to that. It transitions from that to that. And so now let's look and see what we've got looking down on it. And so we come in, and then there we look down. It's like, wait, wait a minute. What was that inside of there? Let's take a closer look at that. So what that means is it's time for me to go to the next tool. So what we're going to do is we are going to explore the speed path. And so I want to slow down when I'm at this arc so that I can have a second to look at what's inside of there, because I couldn't really see what this was. So I'm going to put a speed point into this section of the arc, and I'm going to put it here. And you notice by the way that this white line changes to brighter white, the section that it's going to apply to. Now, because there are no other speed points, right now that is going to affect the entire path. And so the options for the speed path go from 0.1 all the way up to 100. So that gives you a lot of flexibility in how fast you're going to have this go through there. So I'm going to slow this down at this point. Actually, I'm going to put 2 speed points in. I've got that one where I wanted to slow it down. Let's start with one back here at the beginning to establish the speed that we want. And I'm going to put that, oh, what are we at there? 2.9. That's fairly quick, but not too quick for what we're doing here. So, and the other thing is it's going to be relative to the size of your path. So going the same speed on a small path is going to seem faster than going that speed on a large path. So it's one of those things where it's going to take iterations for you to get there. So what I want to do in this location is I want to slow it down so that we've got a chance to see that. And so bringing it back, this will show you. So we start, let me get the whole path here. So we start with it over here where we're at the beginning, and it goes at that speed, and then it starts slowing down. Now it starts slowing down earlier than I wanted it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another control point about here, and I'm going to have that match pretty closely to the one that's over there so that I'm maintaining that speed. By the way, if you zoom in on these, you have a lot better control than if you are zoomed out. So the 2.9, and then it transitions to this 0.4 speed long enough for us to take a look, and then I'm going to want it to speed back up here and get on. So what I'm doing here is just kind of slowing it down All right, so let's take a look at that now with the series of 4. We'll bring it in here, we'll stop it, take it back to the beginning, and I'll move this so that you can see both the viewfinder and the path that it's going through. Now it slows down, and then it speeds back up. So I want to actually move this a little bit further out so that it's slow for a little bit longer on there. And I want to now change it. So let's make this little item an area of emphasis. So I'm going to add another direction point here. And I'm going to make that so that it's looking straight down at that same section. Okay, so again, going back to our path, we'll start at the beginning. And let's see what that does. Okay, so that gives me a little bit more of what I'm looking for, but I want to get in closer and see what's in the middle of that object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up closer, and I'm going to introduce you to the last tool that is part of the camera paths. You'll notice that I use the changing scale a lot when I'm working, because it's a lot easier to do detail work up close, but it's easier to see the big picture when you're at a larger scale so that you can see more of it. So I'm going to bring this back to the beginning, and I'm going to run it, and let's see what we got. So there we've got the direction down, but I want us to zoom in a little bit. So let me stop the camera moving, and I'm going to use the scale to move in closer. And what I'm going to do, and because I'm introducing a new tool, a zoom point, what it's going to do is anywhere I put this, it is going to adjust the whole arc because there's no other direction on here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the very beginning. And so I'm going to add this tool, and I will end up moving this camera, this speed, and this zoom controller all back to this opening point once I have them about where I want them. So what you'll see here is like the camera is, you know, a little ways down, but that zoom point is applying to it. So what I want to do is I want to bring this back so that I know what I'm starting with. So again, I grab the top of the zoom point, I grip it, and then I pull the trigger to control the zoom. So the zoom has the ability to go from um, 10 to 140. So 140 is the widest, 10 is the most zoomed in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with it basically there. And you notice that when I change my zoom point, I'm also going to have to change my direction point. So I'm going to move the direction point down to, oh, I need to do that. So I was looking here, and that's not where I should be looking because that's not, so I pull the trigger, and that's going to get me there. So this is where we come. We come back to here. I've got the zoom where I want it. I've got the direction where I want it, and I've got the speed where I want it. So I'm going to go ahead and move all these down to that anchor point, just so that I have that establishing this is what it's going to be from the very beginning. So when we look at that now, I like that zoom there, but at this point, the entire site is got a 36.3 zoom. So what I need to do is come in and start deciding how I want this to look in different places. So I'm going to move my camera here to my approach, and I'm not real pleased with the fact that it's pointing off to the side at this point. Now the reason it's doing that is because it's transitioning from this first camera to this one. So as it's moving, it's transitioning there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back, and again, I zoom in because it's easier to grab a hold of these things when you're zoomed in, or when you have your scale so that everything is larger in front of you. And this is where I want to transition or start the transition to be zoomed right in on whatever it is at the top of that thing. I see that color. I want to get in close to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a zoom point to the area of this camera, and you notice when I do that, it affects all the way back to the previous zoom point. So at this point, we start zooming in, and we can see that there's some egg-shaped looking things in there. And so now what I'm going to do, and again, this is a iterative process where you're going to have to set and then change, and it gives you very fine level of control of the shot that you're seeing. So I come in, I zoom there, that's at 10. So that is the closest that I can get to that with a zoom. But if I wanted that to be even closer, I can adjust my camera path to get it to do exactly what I want in that location. And so both this anchor point and this anchor point before it are going to affect that line. And so I just have to decide how I want this coming in. So let's see what this does now. All right, I like it. So those are the tools that we've got. We've got the select path tool. We've got the show pass tool, which turns the pass on and off. We've got the delete path, which I'm not going to demonstrate because I've just created the path. We've got the record path. So now we've got the ability to record this, and I'll do that right at the end. The add anchor point, the delete points. The delete points we haven't really demonstrated, but that allows you to delete. I'll delete this one camera point. See what that does. You see that changes it. I'm just going to undo that. Undo is your friend. You've got the add direction point, you've got the add speed point, and you've got the add zoom point. And those are the tools that we have. And so before I leave you, I'll show you what it looks like when we record. So we'll move this back. I'll make this so you can see it. By the way, when the camera is recording the path, all your controls on your controllers are disabled temporarily. So I'm going to record the path. And then once that path is recorded, I'll be able to go into my OpenBrush folder, go into the videos folder, and the file will be in that location for us to do. All right, that's all I'm going to talk about today. I've gone a little bit into technique to show you how these things all work, but we have demonstrated the tools. Now it really is just a matter of spending time spending the time in doing the work, learning how it works, and of course, saving your sketches. That's all I've got for today. This is Kevin Tharp. I hope this has been helpful to you. I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.